This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right, so we will call to order the Thursday, March 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Easthampton Energy Advisory Committee. I am Jamie Paquette, the chair of the committee. We are going to start with a review and approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting on Thursday, January 19th. Anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Move that we approve the minutes.
Second?
I second it. I would like to thank John very much for editing.
You did already.
Really?
Yes.
No, but I wanted the record. Yeah, the record.
Got some reporters in here. Can we bring in channel 22?
I really do appreciate it.
All right, it has been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Connie, for doing the minutes. Thank you, John, for your input on getting them edited. Awesome. All right, so Connie, you can submit those to the city.
I will, yes.
In the aftermath of this. Public speak, we do not have any members of the public present, so we will move on to our next bit. Just these sort of committee updates, meeting dates and format. I've kept that on here. I think, yeah, going back to the first Monday, so we've pegged April 3rd previously as our next meeting, so there's no conflicts with that right now. We should be good.
Okay, so no wait. So we're gonna do the third.
We'll do the first Monday. We'll go to April 3rd.
Okay, all right. The only reason we should think about that is, as I said. Oh, but your schedule won't let you do that.
My schedule can. I don't know. Depends. But you're saying there's some conflicts on.
Well, it's just
future.
that the third that's completely open.
Right.
But
and the
I
first,
don't.
I'm seeing that there's a holiday on the third Monday of April.
Oh, there is?
Yeah, let's see.
Oh, the third.
Patriots Day.
Tuesday, April Fool's Day.
Well, the first is fine with me. I don't care what we do.
So we'll stick with April 3rd for now.
Okay.
We can just kind of discuss as we go, but I think we'll pencil in the first Monday, and then I do have Thursday options that I can do, or third Mondays if we need to go to that.
What time on the 3rd, April 3rd?
That's a good question. Does everyone like to do them a little bit earlier like this, like 4:30, 5 o'clock?
Doesn't matter to
It's
me.
up to you guys.
Yeah, I mean that
I can't do
helps
it earlier.
from extending your workday too excessively. So
4:30.
let's stick with 4:30.
Okay.
I think that's a good time for me too. All right. So April 3rd, 4:30, and we'll stick with in-person meetings until otherwise needed. If anyone has a conflict with being here in person, we can talk about the hybrid option or remote option. All right, April 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I put in here the thing, meeting with other committee heads. So there have been something circulating. A couple of the other people on various city committees had sent stuff out to all the heads of the various committees and things, saying, hey, it would be great if we could get together online and just talk, just like meet each other and like talk about what we're doing, and things like that. And it ended up being a relatively small. It did happen a few weeks ago, and it was like the couple people from the Council on Disability, one person from the I forget what theirs was, the community.
Development?
No, not development. More like outreach.
Yeah, community relations.
Community relations.
I know
Yeah.
those people. My partner's one of them on that committee.
Lovely.
Okay. So so there's a community relations.
Emily?
committee.
Was Emily in?
I forget the name of the woman who was on that right off the top of my head. But anyway, it was interesting. So even with a small group, it was kind of interesting to hear what others are doing. It was also interesting to hear the struggles other people had with board membership, as well as just like getting word out about things that they're doing, about initiatives, right? I think it's like common problems that all these committees are having, and of course, some are easier than others because more people are paying attention to what's going on at the planning committee or whatever. But then I was also talking to Jesse, who's the head of the planning committee, who I just happen to know outside of this.
The planning committee?
The planning committee,
Okay, so
yeah.
that person was at this meeting?
No, it was not at this meeting. It was just a separate conversation I ended up having.
And what is this person's
Aren't
name?
they a board? They're not a board?
There would be a board, a planning board.
Oh, planning board. So
So
Jesse's the chair of the planning board.
Right.
Jesse.
Jesse Belcher Timmy. BLCHER-TIMME.
Sounds right.
So you know Jesse.
I think so. I don't know if I've ever been formally introduced. I have
Okay.
actually. I've met him one time at least, but I know I hear about it all the planning board stuff because it's in that office. So
Mm-hmm.
and then the Tasty Talk rooms. So
Right, all that's going. Yeah, there's all that stuff going on. Yeah, and that just made me think, like, when we start talking about things like stretch code, or we start talking about, any other energy-related things like infrastructure stuff, right? There are all these other boards and committees where that may have a purview over this, or an interest where there's overlap, right? This whole pollinator and bee city thing, which I'll talk a little bit more about too. That's another place where there may be overlapping ways for us to work with other committees or to have common interest and common purpose. And then as we're going to be going out, hopefully, and doing public outreach around some of our initiatives, there may be ways to do that. I was asking questions about things that they've done to try to garner interest in what they're doing. Again, there's no silver bullets out there, right? It's all, I asked about things like the farmers market type thing, and it was like have decidedly mixed results for things like that. Actually getting people to pay attention to stuff. Again, the one time somebody had some successes when they ended up like selling cookies or having doing some sort of baked goods thing, and of course that like brought people in. So there's always got to be like the hook beyond just the message. But so I was just thinking about that in terms of our committee and what we might do as moving forward, as we want to gain some traction around some of these areas of interest, around initiatives that we're going to have, and then around trying to find some more people to join the committee as well. So to the extent that we can talk to other groups, to your partners on the community relations committee. So community relations is going to be big as we're going to the public for something like aggregation, or even like stretch code, or school bus electrification, climate action plan, all that stuff. So I just throw this out there as just something to sort of keep in mind. I don't have a specific way forward necessarily with this, but
Who initiated it?
it was Angelique Baker, who is the chair of the disability committee, and there was another gentleman from that committee who was on the call as well, and I can find his name, but no. So they're trying to do another one. Again, there weren't that many people. There were a couple other people who had tried to join, or like couldn't quite make the time work. But I'd be interested to hear from some of the other groups what they're doing too.
Sure.
And where how that might inform things that we want to push for, that we might line up behind or work with them on. So as we're working through this, if there are other places where it makes sense, and as planning is doing stuff like considering a huge new development in town, there may be things that we want to weigh in on, or that we want to have some say.
So it is a planning board. We're just a committee. So they actually make decisions.
They do.
Okay.
Making sure like compliance with certain zoning rules and other things.
Right, they have the power to like vote things down, I think, as well, and all that. So anyway, so we'll if and when there is another one of those, I'm happy to spread the word. Again, doesn't have to be limited to chairs. So if people are interested in joining something like that, I'm happy to
It sounds like it would be interesting to do that.
But yeah, I think that more communication within the different groups in the city can only be a good thing. Because it's too easy to get siloed and lose sight of some of the other stuff that's going on. Nothing else there. I'll move on to aggregation, which is going to be a very quick update because I do not have an update. Unfortunately, I reached out to Lindsay again today to say, hey, any progress from the solicitor, and I did not hear back yet as of today.
What do you think is going on?
I think it's not a priority for the solicitor. The solicitor is not a full-time employee of the city. There's only so much time that they have, and the thing I worry about, though, is that we're going to start coming up on the end of the fiscal year, which is end of June, and they're only budgeted for a certain amount of time. So if they start to run up against like budget and they can't do any more work, then our thing may fall by the wayside. So
do you think we should like talk to the mayor?
I think I need to try to amplify it a little bit more, and maybe I could even get permission, maybe even like, the lawyer from Good Energy could reach out directly to the solicitor and say, hey, like, can we hash this stuff out, over the course of an hour meeting or something like that. So I'll get back with Good Energy and let them know. I was really hoping to have an update, but unfortunately not. So, but definitely want to ramp that up so that we don't run into a situation where all of a sudden we're pushing into the second half of the year with that.
Weren't they already involved with this somehow? I mean,
Who?
to get it to the stage, the solicitor, to get it to the stage we're at.
Well, yeah, they
Yeah,
reviewed
okay.
once. They redlined it and sent it back to Good Energy. Good Energy's lawyers reviewed it, sort of added their comments and like, yes, we can accept this. Here's stuff we want to push back on. That's back at the
So it's
solicitor
an unfinished
now.
business item on their
It's unfinished
on their backlog or
Yeah. So that's where that is at the moment. But I'll keep at it and see if I can escalate it a little bit if need be. The climate action plan.
Yeah,
Cassie,
so-
can you take us through?
Awesome. So, I don't know, I know I didn't have much of a lead time for y'all. I sent that email
Yeah.
out that was
Yeah.
showing about one of the questions we had. I have this printout of the PowerPoint and I printed it in the wrong way, so everything's upside down on the next page, sorry.
That's fine.
But,
Thank you.
we had our kickoff meeting with them, which basically was just them laying out like what the next steps are, who the team is, obviously, which we already knew. And much of it just mirrors, there's not much change since the proposal, and the clarifications that were got there. If you make it to the work plan section, that's where they get into a little more of the fine details.
Okay.
That's helpful, of what their next steps are. But one of the things that was really helpful is that they talked about and made a point to explain that they are planning to have the Energy Advisory Committee involvement throughout the process. And we ended up asking them to add more to it. So beyond there is this page that lists the things. It's not numbered, I apologize. But
Hold that up again, where are you?
Plan for committee after the work.
Oh,
plan. I think
okay.
It's after the work plan.
Thank you for printing this.
yeah, oh, absolutely. I know
Okay.
you're just getting it, so I apologize for not giving you more time to look at it. But they were talking about, they wanted to work with all of y'all for the action identification, the timeline, metrics, implementation, roadmap, plan review, all that good stuff that we added. For one, they were asking about confirming that we were cool with the greenhouse gas inventory tool, which is what I emailed about.
Yeah.
Going with that one. There's also a question of what our base year should be, like our baseline year to base all the data off of should be.
What do you mean fiscally? What do you mean?
No, so it means like what are we going to set as
Emissions,
how should I say
baseline
it?
emissions.
Yeah, the base. Like where are we trying to work down from? Like because you wouldn't want to do 2021, right? Because that was during the pandemic, so it's not a good example. Or you wouldn't want to do a year that was during the pandemic, right? Because that wouldn't be a good example of what to work down from. We want something that's quite typical. Their recommendation was 2017, just because it kind of captures, it's pre-pandemic, so it was kind of like before any of those influences came through, but it's not so old, so far back that it doesn't encapsulate some of those things that have happened.
Right.
That was their recommendation.
Yeah.
Do you have that information? 2017?
Of what the greenhouse gas emissions
Yeah.
were. No,
Well,
that's
there's databases though
Yeah,
that.
So you'd have to find all of that.
That's
Okay.
really fair. Which year to peg it to go back and find that data
Right.
from? Okay.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the city's too appreciably different. I mean, sort of the population or
That was
general-
my thought. Population, I don't think has changed much.
Yeah, I don't
since
know.
then. Yeah, not by a
think,
huge degree.
Not Weston and Sampson, but Honeywell report, I think was looking at 17, 18, 19.
Okay.
Or maybe it was 18, 19, 20, but I recall, actually, I have charts for them. They had calendar year 17, 18, 19 data for fuel consumption. Not that this is the best data, that I think we got to go beyond. This is just
Yes.
government operations.
Agreed.
Is it fairly consistent year over year?
They all add up to in the neighborhood of 13, 14 million, 14,000 million BTUs equivalent, BTU equivalents.
Okay.
I mean, so they're not that, each of them varies a little bit, but they're not that different. But I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, especially if, let's see. I mean, the baseline, if you start with 2017, then whatever improvements we made in the 5 years or so since are going to give us a jump start on our
Right.
reaching our targets.
Right.
So, but wait a minute. That's the data you collect. That's our reference point for reduction. Okay. I'm just thinking about the larger climate plans. Are talking about, aren't they a reference 1990? Aren't they referencing 1990 emissions, like the big national
A lot of them go back.
national plans and the state plans
Yes.
are looking about what are emissions now.
The goals,
We
yes.
don't want zero in relation to 2017 or 10% that's
Right.
not green energy in relation to 2017. We want it in relation to some earlier base point. I mean, if we could get the other, great, but well, we can figure that out. But data,
Okay.
what's important is where can you get decent data
Right.
to start with?
Yeah.
So that was the other one. So one was the baseline. Sounds like 2017 seems acceptable, and like that's not totally a crazy number.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any
Yeah.
reason to push back on it.
They were going to do it by fiscal year also for each year, because that's what
Okay.
Green Communities does.
Yeah.
It'd be helpful for me, for my Green
Yeah.
Communities.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for sure.
And then yeah, so the other one was this tool. Which tool? There's a lot of different, or they pose these 3 different tool options. The MAPC, which is a regional, it's a regional planning group over
Metro Boston.
Metro Boston. They've created this tool that a lot of other communities have used. We were thinking some of the benefits of going with that one was that we want to make sure we're aligned with what the state would anticipate us to be aligned with, in terms of utilizing this data for grant opportunities and incentives in the future. The EPA one, by their assessment, is a little more generalized. It isn't as, and even on the EPA website, when I was looking at it, it says for it wasn't as fine scale the way that they were describing it.
Right.
And I was like, okay.
Yeah. I looked at the, I guess it was the PowerPoint that they put out. And it also looks like, they really will help you get the right information. And some of it you are going to have to go MAPC.
Not EPA. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Some of it you are going to have to hunt for, but it looks like they either tell you where to go or you can get in touch with them and they'll help you figure out where to go. I mean, it seems like a really good tool. I was very impressed just from glancing at what you sent us.
Oh, that's good to hear.
What do you
Did you
think?
look at the tool as well as the PowerPoint?
I didn't look at the tool too, no. I was involved with the stretch code.
Great, that's good. That's good that you did.
But
I
what do
spent a
you
couple
think?
hours going through the tool. I think it's pretty darn good, and it's the best we can expect. And then we're more comparable with other municipalities going through the same thing. It'll be easier to have, say, we use the same methodology, same data sources. We can do some comparisons.
It's free.
And there's, they give you the links to the databases, or more or less.
They explained too at the kickoff meeting, like they're ready to do the hunt. That's part of it. They're going to go beyond, what is available already data, and we have tailored data for Easthampton specifically through the Mass Energy Insight that we've been collecting through Green Communities, and then it's going even beyond that and trying to figure out, how accurate can we get talking to specific departments.
Will this tool make it easier for you to do the green community? Like, is there an alliance between the two?
I think that it might. It's just that for Green Communities, what they want me to do is get very specific, like monthly, we use this much oil, and it costs this much each month, every year. So it might.
Yeah.
What the main benefit for Green Communities will be is that, they referenced using our MEI data. I was like, can you do a quick review of our MEI data and make sure that it's comprehensive, like it's as comprehensive as it's supposed to be? I think that it is, but it would be nice to get them to check to make sure that it is, and that it's like we're doing it right. Because, I've been doing that, I just did my 3rd annual report, but it would be nice to have some experts review and make sure we're doing it
Yeah.
definitely
It's
right.
still government focused, isn't it?
It is,
It's government
absolutely.
operations there.
Yes.
So this is a
So
whole
it's just
nother
that one
realm is
piece.
getting into
Right.
everybody else's transportation,
Absolutely.
everybody else's homes and businesses
Yes.
and all that, yeah.
And they know that, and so I was just answering her question of like,
Yeah,
is it
yeah,
good for
yeah.
green communities?
Yeah.
So I think that it will be beneficial in that way. Okay, cool. It sounds like people are, like, you have any special notes about using MAPC that I can share with them, or it sounds like.
I was very impressed with 10 minutes, it's about looking at it,
I
but you know, I really was. I thought, wow, this looks amazing.
Because if you needed more time, I was hoping to try to get back to them on Monday, but if you don't want to sit with it over the weekend, then I should be fine.
You know, in the end, I mean, we want as accurate a picture as possible.
Right.
But whether we have 10,000 metric tons of generation in Easthampton or 9,000, we know we've got a long way to go. And you know, if it's off by orders of magnitude, that's a problem, because then we don't set our sights high enough. We don't choose the most aggressive technologies or regulations or whatever. But if it's off, you know, by 5, 10, 15, 20% even, I don't think that's going to change our action plans all that much, and we're going to be revising this as we go anyway, our targets, and getting better data hopefully. So
Yes.
I don't think this has to be perfect.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing about it that seems like a good idea is that it's tested. I mean, a lot of
Yes.
communities have been using it.
Yes.
It seems like they're liking it. They're continuing to use it. So that's a good sign, I would think.
I agree with that. Okay, awesome. And so the other piece, then next steps is there is like this checklist that is a preliminary checklist that I'm going to try to start working on filling out for using MAPC, that then they'll go from there and then really start to dig.
As in an application, kind of?
No, it's not an
more-
application.
more like-
I think it just helps like guide how the tool tailors to your town,
Oh,
in my
okay,
opinion.
okay.
Then after that, though, they'll start doing the data collection, and that was the other piece that we wanted added to their list of for stuff to do with EAC, was not just come back when it's the action identification time, but we'll be like as I work with them to do the data collection, my plan is to be sharing that all with you and taking feedback and going back and forth throughout that process as well. So they expect that now. And
So they're going to be actively involved in this data collection with you. They're not going to just wait for you to get the information.
That's their responsibility,
they're
right?
the ones
Great.
leading the charge.
Maybe we can help them, but
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Because they have more of the expertise of like what is
Right.
needed and where to get it, and then I'm going to be essentially the main point of contact with them going forward. So whenever you guys have information that you want to get to them, just tell me, I'll get it there, and vice versa. And then same with Jeff or other departments. So
Okay.
we're gonna go that way. But really, the immediate next steps are for me to get these notes back to them, which are that you guys generally just agree. MAPC 2017 fiscal year, that's all okay. Then I'm going to try to do this checklist, and then they'll probably start with the hunt, really, to get the data. So
I wonder
It's exciting.
when we'll, I don't know, no one really knows when we'll be to the point where we might start viewing our emissions and economic activity as kind of normal again. We thought maybe this past year, the economy picked up quite a bit, and people were doing more of their typical stuff. We all still lived in our houses. I bet you our building energy, costs went way up because everyone was operating out of their homes. But maybe we can, before this study's over, we'll be able to plug in. I don't know what the most recent. I thought I heard the most recent was 2020, or is it 21?
for what?
For a lot of these databases, the most recent stuff they have to go on. 2017 is maybe recommended, but I thought that some of them may have more recent stuff. But if we can get 22, even this time next year and
Right.
factor it in,
Right.
it would be good. So just as a check on 2017 a little bit to see if it doesn't make sense.
Right. Because we're going to want to be able to track into the future our emission use anyway. So it's like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, so we want to know the trends over time. Even if 2017 is the baseline, the data for those other years I think would be important to get the trends.
That's one of the tricky things that I'm not sure anybody's really talked about. I haven't thought about it yet, is how you do in-course not corrections, but in-course evaluations about progress
That's
evaluations.
something we need to, yeah.
If all these databases that we're getting the stuff we rely on update, 2 years after the fact, we might be always kind of looking behind us.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll bring it up.
I
Yeah.
think some of it probably is available more quickly than that.
Yeah, and they do have a thing here for like an accountability roadmap
Yeah.
as well, which is about the ongoing sort of measuring, are you on track or off track with,
Right.
with what you're doing.
Right, that's crucial.
Right. Yeah, I wonder what goes into that exactly. I mean, we talk about metrics and reporting mechanisms.
Yeah, I mean, that should be made clear in whatever the final plan product is, should say how we do it.
We're gonna run into problems with the waste end of it, at least the solid waste end of it, since Easthampton's a washed hands community, meaning the city has no involvement in it. It's all up to you to deal with your vendors.
Right.
And I was in touch with Eichstadt, whatever, I don't remember her married name,
Health.
ended up being health agent, about it, I don't know, about a year ago. I had other reasons for being interested in it. They had an ordinance, a health ordinance that required haulers, and you see this often in towns that have no involvement in waste handling and responsibility or facilities for waste, real facilities, or no collection. They had a requirement that haulers supply all their customer information, where the material goes, how much is recycled, tonnage, all that. And I called and offered to help compile it. I have my 20, 30 years in waste management stuff. I could help them with that. Next thing I heard from them, they decided to discard that requirement, so the haulers aren't required to supply that
Is that
information.
statewide or just?
No, it was just City of Easthampton.
Oh, interesting.
And then you lose access to grants too. There's grants on the solid waste end of things, the EP end of things, and if you
Yes.
can't supply information, it's kind of like what you're trying to do with green community stuff. If you can't supply that information, you lose access to some possible grant money, education money. So maybe I'll talk to the mayor about that, or the Board of Health at some point, but there's going to be nothing to go on for waste, except generic numbers. The state generates 6 million tons of trash. There's an average recycling rate of 25, and you have 16,000 people, so we'll call it that.
Well, the waste is the main part of the, where is it?
But it's a small part of generation, really. From my experience with solid waste, at UMass it was like about, you could maybe account for, it's under 5%, I don't remember the numbers, maybe 2% of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions at the university had anything to do with waste, except that if you include the upstream, which I think in this corresponds to scope 3 emissions, all the shit we buy and bring in and consume, what the energy that goes into the stuff that we consume. You add that in, it gets
embodied energy of all that stuff.
it blows up. But it's not going to be a huge part of the whole picture, but we're kind of stuck on that one.
Well, hopefully, the end result will be is a real picture of, this is an issue. This is a gap that we have, and we're missing this. It should be frank about that in the report.
The recycling bins are out there. You see them all over the streets, the blue USA ones, or if you have tell people, it's just that nobody's gotten any count of anything.
Right.
And the tonnage.
So, is this like a list in terms of first we do this, then we do this, then we do this?
Yeah, because so it kind of
It looks like
corresponds
it
to
is,
this
but-
project schedule.
Oh, where's the second? Look at
Just
this.
one, probably come up a page back, or one or two.
So it's the overview of tasks and then the schedule.
Yeah, that one.
Oh, okay,
So
all right,
it kind of
I get it, all right.
goes with that.
This is what I was looking for. Yeah. Oh, great. Okay.
So basically, we're going to be doing this assessment and inventorying for the next, 5 months.
Right.
But then, starting in June, within that period, we're going to start doing analysis of these barriers and some outreach stuff. So
This is really great.
yeah,
Wow.
it's lot.
Very cool. Okay.
That's all I have for now, so I appreciate it a lot.
Okay.
But I'll be in touch, obviously, each meeting, I'll just
Yeah.
I'll keep you posted. And
Thanks.
if there's extra, I'll email about it.
Yeah, thank you again for getting the meeting with them together, that we could,
Yeah,
talk
that
to them
was so
directly.
helpful. I
Good.
really
Bring
found that very
getting Jeff
useful.
involved and everything was
Yeah.
definitely
Okay.
Nice
appreciated.
we have, nice we're getting a 6 month or more jump on what we would have otherwise been doing if it was out the bid.
Right.
It's true, it's true.
Yeah, so yeah, just let us know when the next, piece of input that you need, or if there's
Okay.
a time that we're gonna need to be, available, or set up a meeting or something like that, or whatever. So,
Awesome, awesome, I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about our next piece, which is our school bus electrification.
So I'm working on a PowerPoint, but I'm struggling with it a little bit. I got a template from World Resources Institute. They do a lot of work. You were in their website and
Yes,
shared some stuff with their electric bus initiative. But it's mostly set up for a customer that is not like us.
Yes,
It's set up for
right.
somebody who's running their own fleet.
There's so many
How do
articles
you
are like
figure?
that
How do you
too.
figure that all out? How do you procure the buses? You're gonna maintenance. How are you gonna apply for the grants? And it's good stuff to know. And those are options, but they're unforeseeable options for us. And so, I think I'm just gonna go give some background on electric buses and the technology and costs and the trends and the sort of tidal wave that's happening of I think there were $5 billion worth of grant applications
Yeah. That's a lot of
under
money.
this program.
Oh, sorry, I can say after.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, I got an email like a day ago. And ChargePoint is the service that we use to manage the EV chargers here for the cars. They sent an email something about electric bus incentive. It's through that company, but I can forward it to you guys. But again, I don't know if it would fit. It wouldn't fit for our scenario. It seemed like if you own your buses, again.
What was it?
Some kind of
There's
finance.
an incentive to get charge points to get.
To use ChargePoint,
yeah.
through this company, ChargePoint, they would help you make I think something about supporting electric buses. But again,
Yeah.
I think it's the same problem of like.
So we could talk about what's the current situation with electrification of buses, and does it seem viable from what we know, and does it seem like something we should push our city officials who deal with the bus company, whether it's the school committee, the Nick, whose name I don't know the last name, the business manager, right, to recommend and push, but recommend at least that they consider it and try to meet with the bus companies to push them and say that this is where we're heading, and we're going to be giving priority to companies that can provide this in future contracts. I can go over at some point. I'm not terribly prepared for it now, except for off the cuff. What the current state is. I mean, some of it was in that memo I did during the summer, and hasn't changed a whole lot from them. There's been more positive developments, more money out there, some new technology breakthroughs. I still haven't heard from the Vermont project that was running 3 different buses there through the winter to see about reliability and efficiency and all that in cold weather conditions. But I'll work on the PowerPoint. But
So the PowerPoint is for.
Well, it could be used here, but more for going to like school committee or city council, and to get them to support meeting with the bus vendors. I come up with a lot of what I've spent time in the last week or so is crunching the numbers about how much diesel we're using, what amount of carbon that represents, the cost, the mileage. And I could tell you a few things just that are kind of interest that we drive, and it's based on the RFP that went out for the last contract. They've had all the routes and miles in it.
Oh, okay.
And we drive, based on the routes in a school year, 63,000 miles, bus routes, regular routes. And that doesn't include the dead miles, which is them going back and forth after the route's over and going to the next route, going back to Durham. So,
Right.
so you put in a calculation. All told, it's like in the neighborhood of 80,000 miles a year. It's at current prices, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000 of our bill is diesel costs.
We pay for the diesel?
We pay the contractor who
Oh,
pays
okay.
their own diesel.
Right,
bills, yeah.
okay.
And I came up with that the bus emissions alone, and I really think there's no getting around considering, I know it's hard to own it, but there's no getting around considering bus emissions as a city operation. We're just contracting. We're paying other people to do it. It's for our kids, it's for public purpose.
Right.
It's around 14% I came up with based on
I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. Can you explain that again? What do you mean?
we should take ownership of those emissions. It's not just some private
yes, for
activity.
sure.
This is a
Okay, yes.
public program. It's our school kids.
Definitely.
We pay the people to run these buses, and they represent 14% of the city's total emissions.
Wow.
The city operations total emissions, based on converting the diesel gallons to BTUs and carbon,
Right.
and looking at the bottom line. The denominator is the Honeywell figures, that 14,000 million BTUs. You know, that's the denominator of the equation. So it's a good chunk.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the stuff I would try to
That's really
emphasize for the
interesting.
committee and for presentation, and also the health effects
Yes.
issues, which you've been focusing a lot
Yeah.
on, which I think a lot of parents and school committee people may be concerned about, as
Right.
much as
Well, especially then to find that article where Durham School Service is being sued by Worcester and
Is it Durham?
Holyoke. Yeah,
I
it's
didn't
Durham.
get into it. I'm sorry.
It
I
actually
saw it
is
come in,
Durham
but I didn't read it.
being
Yeah.
sued for idling and by these environmental justice communities, essentially for violating anti-idling laws.
You know what I heard
and being on the
though?
hook.
Interesting. I think it was from a bus driver that I work with who works for Northampton. He used to work for Durham. They're very strict about turning off, whereas Northampton, people I work for, until recently they'd run the bus for an hour in the morning. Just out of tradition and habit, and like, we want to make sure it'll function. It's got to be warmed up and functioning. But you could do it for 10 minutes, and it would be fine. 15 if it's freezing up. But this guy worked for Durham before he came to work for Northampton, and he said they give you 5 minutes. And so it'd be interesting if they're actually doing that here. But
Yeah, it was interesting to see that.
I mean, they're in a residential neighborhood over there. If they ran their buses for an hour down there, people
So,
would be
do
dropping dead.
you think it would be inappropriate to just go to the local Durham company and ask them, like, are there plans to buy electric buses?
I did that once,
Did
like
you?
a year ago.
Yeah, I remember you-
But
And what happened?
they pretty much referred me to. They gave me a few pieces of information about whatever about their operations, but they mostly referred me to upper level people who I never called.
I sent them an email, the upper level people. I've never heard anything.
Yeah.
I didn't have names. I suppose it helps to have names.
I think we should have we need to have the school committee as an ally sponsor, whatever, before we go off and talk to.
Right, because they'll be the ones pushing the business manager and the actual people who are going to be dealing with the contract
Yeah.
to center this as part of the
Yeah.
discussion.
I just started thinking, like, if I did ever contact someone, I said, I'm a grandmother, I live in town, what's the deal? Not putting it under any umbrellas, but just what's happening here. Because
Did you see
that
that?
company is international, and they do have a lot of electric buses in Europe, like in
I
England.
sent that article out to you guys.
Yeah,
They
so
have
they're
a
not
goal of no.
They're not
diesel.
unaware of the issue.
No, they just haven't. They haven't put a priority on their U.S. operations yet.
Right,
So maybe
right.
that'll change. But so the question is, just go ahead.
Well, maybe it's the same question. I don't know. What do you need to feel prepared, or to go to the school committee and say, hey, can we get a few minutes on the agenda, or just like?
Well, one thing is maybe we'll to have a little pre-conversation with Maren to feeling out about how to approach it with them and what's going to carry the most weight with the school committee. Knowing that I had that conversation with them a couple of meetings back in the hallway here, where it said we're not where they're not taking on any $300,000 buses. And I said, well, okay, I understand that. But not many places are, but there's places that will, you get your vendor to do it. And that was, so.
Maybe the thing to do is to give them the information, like here are the different possibilities. This is what would happen if the city bought buses. This is what it would cost, blah, 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 blah.
Well, I was going to do that.
This is what would happen if we get Durham to do it, I don't know, just give them
I'll mention the other avenues, but they're clearly not something anybody's going to take seriously in Easthampton. I mean, the mayor's said, I don't know exact words, but there's no reason for the city to own a building.
Right.
Right.
As my recall is what she said. I think it's going to be
probably the same thing,
or another building, or whatever it is. I mean, she doesn't believe in, public operations of that scale that have a lot of capital investment, is what my sense. And the school committee is got a big deficit in their budget, I guess, going into this year, and that's what Maren said. So we could lay out in theory, here's 2 other ways you go about it. Other communities do this, but since you're strapped financially and don't want to hire 15 bus drivers and people to oversee them, this is really the only approach that's left.
Right.
But I think I'll come back to the next meeting we have with hopefully PowerPoint, but at least well laid out argument, facts and figures and whatever options. And then if we could then just say, well, that's a resolution of the EAC that we would like the school committee to look at this, and the mayor, whatever, if we need to talk to the mayor first, then I would feel comfortable taking whatever contact somebody gives me, or just calling Aaron and saying, can we bring this to the school committee?
I wonder if there's anyone else in the school committee that might be interested in this. I don't know.
We'll find out when we present to them.
Yeah, I mean, I know some of the people on there. I could talk to Ben Hersey, who's on there, who is a parent of similar age children to me, a child.
I mean, I'd be happy to meet with somebody before a school committee meeting, if they're a member, like whether it's Maren or a guy, this Ben guy, and really kind of brief them and get them some buy-in before the meeting happens, so when the meeting happens, they're going to be ready to chime in and say...
Right. No, that's right. Yeah, you don't want to just come in cold, right? So, yeah. And if you want somebody to, I can help review a PowerPoint or like work through some stuff with them if you want.
And I think, if it's presented in terms of, electric buses are coming down the pike eventually, we're the Energy Committee, we're looking into it, we want to give you the information. We're not so much trying to force you to do something, but we think you should have the information that we now have about this for your future planning.
Right, or tell us what else you need to know, right? Or
right, and then,
what can we do to help you?
Just keep in mind that we have a contract with Smith & Wesson.
Well, I know, but they can make recommendations.
Did I say that on public record?
But they can make recommendations.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant Weston and Sampson.
Oh. Yeah. All right, I'm never going to live that one down. I can see that.
No, it worked well for the purposes we have.
So yeah, but we do, want them to say, they ask more questions, right? See what their questions are. See where again, assuming that we're going to stick with a similar model, which is an external contract to do this, like how can we help them get to that point where we can have that effect?
There's got to be an environmental club in high school, don't you think?
Yeah, pretty sure there is.
Wasn't a few years ago.
And a faculty member.
Talk about this at some point? Yeah.
I tried to find them a couple of years ago.
I'm going to try to track that down, because if we can also, work through them to go to the school committee with this, it makes it a little harder for them to say no. Because I think it's more than just giving. We don't have any authority.
Right.
But I think it's more than just saying we want to give you the information and you do what you want with it, because we got to do something about it.
Yeah.
There's a climate action plan coming, and this is going to be a chunk of it. So.
But this is your first salvo.
Not at once. Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I was thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I agree.
All right, so next meeting, we'll review what you
Yeah.
got, whether it's
Okay,
a
I'll
fully
focus on
completed
that.
product, or, yeah, again, if you want some help getting that into shape before, so that we
Okay.
can have something we feel good about, then we can look at, late spring, kind of getting that to the school committee. And again, I'm happy to have a conversation or make
Yeah.
introductions or, figure out how we should approach that.
Do they take the summer off, or do they just work throughout the summer?
I don't know, because they have to negotiate union contracts and stuff like that. I don't know when, I'm assuming those map to the fiscal year. So maybe they get a little break in July or something, I don't know.
I can imagine them being, what's probably more important is that the school staff are still
Right,
there functioning throughout the year, and
right.
the school committee's only got to make a decision about whether they want to pursue meetings with the vendors, and somebody else can take it from there. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be them, so.
Like the city council, maybe they pare down to an abbreviated meeting schedule, like the city
Yeah.
council goes
Yeah.
down to one meeting a month or something like that, right, for the summer months, and then,
Yeah.
I believe.
Okay.
But yeah, we should try to catch them before the end of the school year. Because at this point, the end of the school year, now we're talking about about 1 year down on a 3-year contract, so that 2 years to go.
Yeah.
And really a year before you really want to have something strong, so that that last year you're already prepared for trying to broaden the scope of the vendor search or the options that are available.
Vendor might be able to cut some red tape and do financing and arrangements with dealers under the new federal
Right.
grants that is expedited relative to what the city could do, but they still probably need a couple of years, so
Yeah,
we need some message to the vendors by the fall, I'd say.
Yeah,
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 okay.
yeah. And the other thing that we keep talking about, but we don't really know how to do this, is to try to establish relationships with some of the surrounding communities.
Right.
Do we know if any of them are thinking in this vein? We don't really.
Right.
And we want to find out, who do we contact? That's something for us to just think about.
You know, Northampton is, I thought I heard something recently about Hampshire Regional, but I'm not sure, but I could try to find out through whoever's contacts are available about, I think I know who to reach in Northampton, but for hill towns, or who else are we thinking about?
Southampton.
Amherst.
Yeah, regional,
Just talk to them, see
yeah.
where their committees are heading. Amherst applied for another grant, I believe. I thought they might have been discouraged by their early experience, but I looked at the list of who got grants, who applied and who got grants.
Mhm.
Amherst was trying to get more buses, electric buses.
They actually have an electric bus, don't they?
Right.
Is it just
Yeah.
one?
There's a couple, we had a couple, 2 or 3.
See, it would be interesting to at least get in touch with whoever orchestrated that.
Yeah.
It might have been someone from Mothers Out Front. I sort of remember
Mm-hmm.
at the time that Mothers Out Front was very involved with that.
Okay.
All right, so we'll have some progress on that for the next time. And for the outline of the plan for what we're going to do. Let's talk stretch code.
Ah, okay. Now
Do
you're
you want me
talking.
to put, I have it on the big screen.
Okay. So first of all, I have some handouts, which will make more sense when I've gone through the PowerPoint, but I'm going to give them to you now. Let's see. 2 of residential, commercial. Commercial.
Thank you. You start to block the camera too, so you pull that out. So
So I was wondering how that works. Does the camera pick up what's happening on the whiteboard? How does that?
No, it won't, unfortunately. But
Then we have to turn it around.
we could, I guess.
Or could we load? No, we can't.
I'll just
I could put the
officially say on the record that the PowerPoint will be available to anyone who requests it.
Thank you. That's just
Please
perfect.
make a request with the city clerk's office.
Okay, these are notes about that, like little from these things. Here you go.
Thank you.
And then The Mass Net Zero Building Coalition put together a very nice question and answer sheet that I'm going to give you guys. And this is all really for you to look at later, but I'm just handing them to you now. Okay.
All right, I was only able to bring it like, I can't bring it close.
Okay, so how do I?
You just tell me when you're ready, I'll control it, because I just need to press this to go forward.
Yeah, but I
You want to do it?
is there a
You can do it
clicker?
first.
There's no clicker.
No, sorry.
So,
You just press this to go
All right.
forward. That's it.
All right, okay. So
stretch
this
code
is
the
about
current, then
the
opt-in
new.
is the
I don't
forestry.
know, I'll let her. So,
Okay, you ready?
ready.
Okay.
John, sure.
Turn around.
So I put a PowerPoint together about the fact that there's a new updated stretch code for 2003, and there's now an opt-in specialized code which did not exist before.
When you say, sorry, 2003 is when the current one was
Yeah.
created?
What went into effect on January 1st, 2003. There is a new stretch code. All the codes have been updated. And the opt-in code is new for 2003.
2023.
Oh, God, yes.
I just, okay,
Yes.
I wanted to be sure because I was slightly confused.
Yes, sounded all right to me when I said,
But-
that tells you how old I am.
But when did it,
Okay.
when
I
did
mean,
it start?
you want to roll back to
2003 wasn't that long ago.
2003. Oh.
Okay, 2023, thank you.
Opt-in
So
2020.
as I'm sure you know, the Next Generation Roadmap Bill specifically states that we have to achieve net zero by 2050. Net zero actually is defined as the total amount of gases that we put into the atmosphere have to be balanced with what we remove from the atmosphere. However, we don't really have the technology to do that. So what we have to do instead is limit the emissions that we're sending out into the environment. And as it happens, the building sector is responsible for 30% of the emissions in Massachusetts. So that's why we have these stretch codes. And I just made a quick history of stretch codes oh, that didn't come out right.
The formatting.
Just the indentations?
Yeah, this always happens.
You're
when
worried about
we send it
indentations,
back
that
and forth.
doesn't
But
matter.
in 2009, is when the stretch code was originally
that's
created, and part of it said that green communities had to use the stretch code. And in 2010, now I'm getting nervous about what date I'm Easthampton was one of the first communities to become a green community. And then in 2021, the DOER became the authority for the stretch code. Before that, it was like the building commission or something. And the Climate Act also said that there would be an opt-in net zero stretch code. So in 2023, the updated stretch codes went into effect, and there's now an opt-in specialized code.
Is that different than the one that, in the line above? Is this an
I'll
opt-in
tell you,
stretch code? Okay.
I'll get into it. So now there are 3 pathways for codes. And the easiest, wait a minute, how do I go back?
Here, see these down here, so tell me when to stop.
Oh, there. This one? Yeah. So, and I'll tell you about the codes more specifically, but interestingly, at this point, 300 communities are using the stretch code, which means they're green communities. And there's a little section here of communities that have opted into the specialized code. Somerville, Cambridge, Brookline, Watertown, and there are several other communities that I know about that are working on it.
And so those ones, they've opted into it, but it hasn't taken effect yet? Sorry, I know there's a little note in there. Where it will take
The
effect in
taking
July.
effect piece, I talk about it later, but
Oh, sorry.
I'll just tell you about it now. The DOER recommends that once a town has opted into the specialized code, that there be a waiting period so that everyone can get trained and become familiar with all of it. So they're suggesting that the 2 times that this would happen in the year are either July 1st or January 1st. I don't know why you can't wait and have it in November, but that's what they said. I listened to one of their presentations. So if you think about the stretch codes, what we basically have are 3 codes that all start with the base code, which was updated in 2023. And Massachusetts added some amendments. The IECC is an international code that a lot of countries use, and as does the United States, but the Massachusetts codes have amendments to that. And then the updated stretch code went into effect in Easthampton on January 1st because we're a green community. And it has all the things in the base code and then more amendments attached to it. And then finally, the opt-in code has all of this with more amendments and things added to it. So I did some fancy stuff here that isn't coming out. Okay, so right now in Easthampton, we are using the stretch code is divided into residential and commercial. And some of the, I didn't go into all the details, but some of the sort of important aspects of it are that they require what they call heat energy recovery ventilation, which means, as far as I can understand what it means, is that you have to ventilate a building. So now the way things are set up in new construction, when air is sent out of a heated building, instead of just letting cold air come in to ventilate, it has to be warmed up with the hot air that's being sent out, which is what heat pumps do. And similarly with air conditioning, just the opposite happens. The hot air has to be cooled down with the air-conditioned air that's going on for ventilation before it comes into the house. Another interesting aspect of it is that as long as there's a place for off-street parking, they have to put in EV charging ready wiring, even if they don't actually put in the charger itself. And they have to meet what's called the HERS rating. A HERS index refers to a standard of energy efficiency, and there's a whole rating system attached to it. The lower the number, the higher the energy efficiency. So right now in 2023, if you are a green community, here are the options for developers. And it's unfortunately, because of the Baker administration, mixed fuel is still part of both, even the opt-in code. But the HERS numbers, this is what they were in 2022. They've all gone down, and they're going to go down again in 2024. And the HERS number is affected by what kind of building you're building. Like the number can be higher here if you're all electric, or if you're all electric and solar. It's kind of confusing to think about, but it does make sense if you think about it. Like they're requiring certain things of you if you do a mixed fuel house, but they're not requiring if you're doing an all electric and solar house. There are incentives that are developing for builders and developers. One thing is they did a study with some contractors and were really able to document, this is the DOER did this, that all electric homes are generally cheaper to build because of heat pumps. The HVAC piece of it is much, much cheaper. There are incentives from the state, there are tax credits from the federal government as well. The commercial stretch code has a new way of looking at how they evaluate buildings, which I'll talk about in a sec. They also are requiring electric vehicle charging, wiring at least, and up until 2023, the stretch code only applied to 100,000 square feet, and it excluded additions and alterations, and that's no longer the case. So there are a lot of good things in this new stretch code that we are using. So the way commercial buildings are now being evaluated is there are measures used to evaluate this. One is what they call the envelope, which I'm sure that you're familiar with this, that, you know, how well are things being kept in or out. And then the ventilation energy recovery I talked about, and also mitigating thermal bridges, but I've never heard of them before, I had to look it up. There's certain materials just suck heat away. And a lot of buildings are built out of materials that just suck heat out of the buildings. So that's another aspect of the design that has to go into these new buildings. So the specialized code builds on what I just described. And and there are several different pathways to reach the requirements. If you're an all-electric house, there's certain hurdles. I'm not going to go over all this, but it's basically the same idea. It's just that it's stricter. And same thing with commercial. There's a lot of encouragement based on the wording of things for all electric. If buildings are going to use fossil fuel systems, they have to pre-wire for electric systems, even if they choose to use fossil fuels. And multi-family buildings over 12,000 square feet have to be passive houses, which is pretty wonderful. So this is, by the way, I got a lot of these from the DOER. They did a presentation, and that's where a lot of these guys come from. So there are, these are the 3 kinds of construction that commercial buildings can use, and then it shows for what the requirements are. And that's what I've given you, those sheets, if you really want to get into it. It shows you the comparisons between the stretch code and the opt-in code, which are right here. I'm not going to explain these to you. I'd be happy to talk to someone about it, but I would love to talk to someone about it, but I'm not going to stand here and explain it because it'll take too long. So if we decide we want to do this, all that happens is the city council votes for it. And then we have this waiting period to allow everyone to get ready to do it. Oh, see, this is too bad. I had this set up so these all came up, these all popped up. No.
You mean
I'll block them all.
This computer doesn't have PowerPoint, so it's all sheets, and it's like way simplified, unfortunately.
Oh, well, anyway, it's too bad. But there are a lot of arguments to be made for the specialized code. Even buildings that are mixed fuel have to be prepared for all electric in the opt-in code, which I think actually is a really important piece, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of retrofitting going on in 10 or 15 years. These buildings are going to be healthier, they're going to be more comfortable, they're going to be more resilient to anything that happens with weather and climate as time goes on. There are a lot of different opportunities for the builders to pick options that work for them. It's cheaper to build, generally speaking, and it follows the roadmap of the Massachusetts climate bill that we have to be at net zero by 2050, and the City Council passed a climate emergency resolution, part of which says that they were supposed to reach net zero emissions. And if that's what we want to do as a city, then we really do have to adopt the stretch codes. Otherwise, we're not really on that path. So.
In addition, are we still in a gas moratorium anyway?
Yes. Well, yes, we are.
Yeah, I know there was something that came up about that recently, but I don't know what the.
Well, I asked about that when we were talking to Wesson.
Right.
That was really put into place because Columbia Gas was trying to pressure the state to allow them to put in a lot of new gas lines. And they thought that if they hit up Easthampton and Northampton in particular, or Northampton is the next one up on that line, that there'd be so much complaining that they'd be allowed to do it. And that didn't really happen. And I don't really know do a lot of people use, what does happen with a lot of these houses? Are they oil? New construction in Easthampton? I don't know.
Doubt there's much oil.
I assume mostly they're all electric already. Since the moratorium.
The moratorium has been around for a long time, though.
What, 5 or 6 years?
There's been a lot of heat pumps. You've seen the proliferation of heat pumps, and it's a lot of new houses, and it's condos, and it's I think also when people are doing renovations, they're
I mean that's an interesting question to look into exactly what exactly are developers doing, builders doing, because they can't put in gas. I don't know. I really don't know. But anyway, my personal opinion is that we should push for the specialized code. And I did try to speak to BJ. She's in Aruba.
Oh, excellent.
So I couldn't talk to her about it.
Who's BJ?
She's the building commissioner.
I thought, Cassie suggested that'd be a good person for me to run all this
She'd be
by.
the enforcer of such
Yeah.
code.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was and the other thing that's interesting about this is that has been a concern about the grid getting overwhelmed if every building is electric. But what they're saying is that the studies that they've done about this is that because of this new kind of construction that they're requiring if we do the opt-in code, that actually it's not going to affect the grid very much, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, if we don't adopt it and we start using more and more electricity, it will affect the grid. So that's another really argument for adopting this. So,
That's very good.
I would like us to make that recommendation to the city. I think that we should all get more information about it, but I do feel like it would be.
I'd like to digest that a little more.
Yeah. The fact sheet that I gave you is actually, I found it pretty informative and useful, and there are a lot of websites. If you just type in, Massachusetts opt-in specialized code, there are a lot of places you can get more information about it too.
Right.
So, thank you for doing that.
So the city council just has to vote on it,
all that
on the
has to
adoption of
happen.
it,
Yeah,
and then it becomes law, essentially.
That's it, yeah. I mean, I actually, the DOR has a handout about adopting it, the adoption process, but it doesn't, it's really about town meetings, like, and that sort of thing. And, they have a town meeting motion set up here, which, I mean, somebody has to write something for the city council. I guess it would look similar to this. I don't really know. But,
One of the things that might be helpful is because since it is relatively new in that there's those, 5 communities that have actually.
yeah, there are a lot of other communities are in the works.
Right.
But yes.
But with those ones that have done it, like, could we reach out to them and like see what their experience has been, or like what if they've kind of gotten information on what the implications of that would be? And,
Well, of course, none of them actually, like, assuming that I think there are some that actually did it in January.
It's too new.
It's not going to go into effect until July.
But still, even if we talk to people who, I'm sorry if I'm getting it mixed up, but the previous opt-in stretch, well, not opt-in, but the stretch code, the middle one, that was, 2021, did you say?
I don't know. I think
That may have already people been feeling the impacts of that and seeing what the complexities of it are and have some experience with.
Well, we have been using the previous one. I mean, that's what's
we should talk with the building
confusing.
commissioner, have them sit with us and.
We have a
rehearse.
specialized code that we have that just got updated, but we as a community have worked with specialized codes since 2010 because we're a green community. This particular upgrade is a pretty significant upgrade for all the green communities. But it doesn't have some of the pieces in it that were actually required by the Climate Act of 2021. They just didn't put it in because of the Baker administration. And a lot of advocates climate advocates were very unhappy with the final stretch code. So, the opt-in code takes care of some of the things that they were concerned about. One of the big things that the opt-in code requires is this issue of requiring builders to electrify, put the wiring in, like if they're doing a mixed fuel construction, they have to wire it for electric, so that down the road there doesn't have to be some kind of major retrofit, which, then that's not a small issue, if we're really talking about saving the planet.
So for those communities who have been able to pass such a thing, it might be helpful to find out what were some of the barriers that they faced, what were some of the arguments against it that they were able to overcome,
That's a really
whatever they may be, or were there not many, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, because you put this on the agenda and put it in front of the city council, and you may get developers and builders showing up.
I'm sure we would. Yeah.
It's going to be.
Actually, I'm just thinking about this. It would be great to find developers ware in favor of it.
Yeah.
Well,
assume there must be some.
Right, those other towns.
I mean, the other thing that that was sort of said casually that is that it's very possible that there will be funding, especially for some of the early adopters from various organizations and grants, to move this along if you are an early adopter of the opt-in code. I mean, I don't know exactly where that information might come from, but I don't even remember what I was listening to where someone made that statement, but it's something else to consider.
I just sent you a, go ahead.
No.
I sent you a copy of something I spend all my free time now listening to energy podcasts. And there's several great sites. There's a institute out of University of Pennsylvania or something. There's one in California. But I just heard this one that was an interview with the former Undersecretary for Energy in the old administration before
You mean with,
what's her face came in, and I don't want to say Shay. What's her name? The new
I don't know.
governor?
Oh, Mara Healy.
Healy.
Yeah.
oh, I thought you
Healy,
meant
before Healy came in and created their own cabinet position, but this woman's name is Judy
yes,
Chang.
right.
One of the things she mentions, and I'm wondering if the codes deal at all with renovations,
Yes.
because she said in 2050 we're going to still have 85% of our housing stock is still going to be houses that are currently in existence.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we've got, that's the bigger chunk of the problem in a way, is how we're going to address those. And so the code will somehow
The special, let me
talk
see if I
about-
can, it depends, in the commercial additions, there's a requirement for multifamily houses, and that includes, it depends on the size, but the larger additions or renovations will require building it like it's a passive house. Yeah.
So with the current stretch code, which went into effect 2021.
The current one went in 2023. The current one
No,
is
the one we have
2023.
experience with now.
The one that
we've
is,
had
the
a
one
couple years of
that's in,
experience.
yeah, but the one that's in effect right now
20.
went into effect on January 1st.
Okay.
Yeah.
But, okay, but so I'm
Previous.
just thinking about anything that's being built right now, which would have started probably last
Yeah.
year, like the Starbucks or
Probably like
whatever. So I'm
grandfathered.
curious if what, but I'm curious with the experience, like what it's like for them to have to design to that, or like I don't know what the.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at what the previous code was, like what's really different.
And obviously, like with the plans they have,
That's what that is, right?
Yes, and I'm just saying I'd have to go back and really look and see.
right. Well, and also like with something like the Tasty Top
That's not what
development.
this is the difference between the 2023 code that we have because
exists.
we're green communities and the opt-in code. This is not about the previous code. This is
Right.
comparing what's called the stretch code for all green communities.
This is
This is for the middle code and the upper code is what these are about.
All right, and aren't
The
we
20
already in the middle? Aren't we?
We are in the middle, but we were talking about
Right.
the experience of the previous code, and I don't really know very much about
Yeah, I
how
don't know.
different that
I may be able to
is.
speak to that because she usually
Yeah.
has to deal with the developers. So.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, or then I'm curious, like with something like the Tasty Top site where they've got these grand plans for all these buildings.
See,
like,
that's
what
why
are
I'd like to
they?
push
What
for
sort?
this.
What are they looking at on the energy side?
Yeah. And also
Is there,
the
like,
schools.
on-site generation and the schools. Well, I mentioned I
Yeah.
made a note about the schools to talk
Yeah.
about real quick at the end here.
Yeah, and like one of the other thing too is like I was thinking about the Tasty Top. That's what they should call it, a Tasty Top development. But that might be a really good place to put in thermal energy. It's going to be this big place with a lot of land around it.
Potentially.
Geothermal, yeah.
Yeah, it's also very close to rivers and wetlands and things
Yeah.
that can make
I mean,
that.
I don't know very much about that technology, but
Yeah, it's
I don't
advancing
know.
all the time. I'm not fully up to date on either, but yeah, I'm curious, from an energy standpoint, like what they're planning for,
yeah.
and if this would be adopted,
Yeah.
like how that might affect.
I mean, I think it's unfortunate that the new school wasn't built with a little bit more awareness of energy conservation. I mean, I know they have some solar panels, but, I think,
And solar thermal heating for the
Right.
water.
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And my understanding is there's solar thermal units. for the
I mean, they would have
Yeah.
had to build to the 2021 stretch
Yeah,
code, maybe?
but they didn't, there were certain things that they could have been required to do that were not required. So,
Yeah.
but I think one of the big
So
changes is that an argument for a lot of things was, well, it's so much more expensive. And that's really no longer the case. I mean, the technology has really developed so that that isn't really an argument anymore for not going with this. So I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So just in terms of next steps to getting this in front of the city council.
Yeah.
Again, it's the type of thing where you would want to take that presentation and do it in front of the council and then urge.
Oh, well, I'd be happy to. I think I should work on it. I'm not sure it's ready for prime time.
It was great, though. So I think it's very much most of the way there.
I would like to have some people with a little more expertise involved in it too. I think like what you're saying, like getting information from people who've done this and who know about what was going on in previous codes and that kind of thing. Because I don't really have that information.
How long has BJ been here?
I don't know.
I'm not sure either. I know she's relatively new, but not so new. She's very experienced.
Yeah, okay.
She just hasn't been in Easthampton forever, but I think she even potentially got her start in Easthampton, then was somewhere else, came back.
Yeah.
It's an interesting story, but she's very knowledgeable. And
well, also I'm hoping that our new consultants will help us with some of this. I would love to have a conversation
I think that
with someone
very
from
valuable.
that organization to talk about this. I would be very grateful if anyone was interested in talking to me about it.
I think they will be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So,
It'd be good to have the commissioner, she called the commissioner? No,
Building commissioner.
inspector. She's
Building
the
inspector. Oh, building
BJ.
inspector. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, excuse me.
She's the best.
She's the building inspector. I believe that's her title.
Have her on board. If you go to city council, you don't want her undercutting
yeah.
her feeling like she hasn't really bought into
Right.
it yet, doesn't agree with us, and then undercut.
I did try to get in touch with
the
her.
on-the-ground impact. I think she'll have the most understanding of the on-the-ground impact.
She wrote me. I wrote to her. She said she was on her way to Aruba, but she'll get in touch with me when she's back. Like, I know.
That's
excellent.
All right, that's a good excuse.
Okay. All right, so see if you can make that conversation happen again. As some of these other things are happening, and we're hearing about these cities and pollinators, like this can be part of a conversation. Or let's grab if you see a city councilor, like start talking to them about it, kind of thing. Like I know Owen at the very least will be upstairs probably.
Yeah, good point. And getting back to buses, this is really all about emissions.
Right.
Everything is really about emissions. We've got to stop spewing this stuff into the atmosphere. And, there's building and then there's transportation. Those are the two big problem areas. And that brings me back to idling. There's a FedEx truck that parks in the parking lot of this building and just runs. He just sits there with his motor on for hours at a time. It makes me crazy. Right next to the police station, this guy does that. That's a problem because of emissions. And I think that's that we need to realize that's really what we're talking about, whether we're talking about buses or buildings or idling. We've got to stop spewing all of this into the air.
It's electrification.
Right.
And then cleaning up this fuel supply.
Yes.
Too.
Yes.
And then idling doesn't matter, right? But in the meantime, we have all this stuff. And again, that's something that can come in with.
Where's the battery now?
The climate. What's that?
If you got a bad electric bus or battery, it's still going to wear your battery down. Idling.
Right.
For different reasons. It matters for different reasons.
Right, but the car will just show they don't need to. I guess the idling is for heating purposes and something a lot of times, or just because laziness. I don't know.
One of the questions I have about, the first time I made this, it ended up being about 20 minutes long, and I thought, I think that's too long. But there is a lot of information, like talking about, the fuel supply, and there are 4 pillars, that they talk about to save the planet, and and one of them is the fuel supply, of course. And I just don't know how. That's one of the things. If we do go to school committee the same way you were talking about buses, is what exactly do we want to say, and where are they in their what's their fund of knowledge about busing or about emissions or about the climate? I don't know. So.
In the interest of time, the B thing is at 6. I don't have to go right at that, but
right, it's almost 6.
Oh, okay.
So we'll come back to this. Hopefully, we'll have progress with the building inspector.
Yes, I'm going to keep working on
else, and then I think I'd like similar time frame. I think we can try to go with this within the next couple of months.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Push for something.
And when you're talking to our consultants, if there is someone who was really into the building codes and is their thing, and they'd be willing to spend some time talking to you,
Yeah.
even just over the phone or whatever. I'd be really grateful.
Well, I think when we get to, definitely when we get to the phase of developing what the actions are.
Right.
Depending on where this is at that time, I
Right.
don't see why it wouldn't go in
Yeah.
there, something that an
Right.
action that the city could take,
Right.
to be proactive.
Yeah, and you could theoretically even go beyond that too, if you really want to be extra proactive. Do you want to talk about the next couple things real quick?
Yeah, so for heat pumps, my counterpart in Northampton, Chris Mason, is that his name? I always
Former
forget.
counterpart?
Yes, now he's with DOER. He became
Oh,
the
yes.
Green Communities Coordinator, which is really exciting for him. But it does seem like the heat pump electrification project is a little stagnated. It's with the state now, and we just have to wait. And that's my understanding as it is. I'm kind of just waiting to hear back about it. So unfortunately, I don't have much of an update at all.
Well,
Okay.
will he be involved in the same planning process for that just now with a different hat on?
I kind of would think yes, because
Yeah.
he took over the position of the person from DOER who had been attending those meetings.
Okay.
So I would think he's still
Is there some
involved.
continuity there?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know who the new person in
Yeah.
Northampton is that we replaced
Right.
him, but.
Okay. Well,
And then for so I will let you know that we'll
Yeah.
get an update. Green Communities, I got the annual report back with some notes. There's an issue with some of the data entry, which is really surprising to me because there's part of the data missing that I was like, I know I entered this, but I think there was some issue with MEI or something. But I figured it out, I redid it and sent it back. We're waiting back. That was the only comment that I received, was just like, where is that missing data? So hopefully we'll see if they have any more notes about it. The Tesla grant still not completed. They're still waiting on supply chain things, which is totally outside of their control on the police side to kit out the Teslas, and then I would do my little training and brochure with them, and then I can close it out. But we're just waiting, and it seems potentially that I thought maybe my next quarterly report would be my final, but I think that there's a chance that might not be the case. I'll have to go to the next quarter.
Okay.
So we'll see, but I'll keep you all posted, and then we'll think like what would the next grant opportunity be. And then, yeah, that's all I got for now.
Okay.
It's pretty good.
Are those reports you do, the spreadsheet on fuel usage and vehicles and whatever in place, is that on the city website somewhere, planning department somewhere?
You have to have special access to get into it, so it's through a program called
Okay.
Mass Energy
I
Insight.
don't mean to edit it and input, but just
No.
the results that you produce.
Oh,
is that
yes.
available to
So
look
yeah,
at?
the annual report would be available. I don't see why I wouldn't be able to share that. I just need to get the final okay that it is right back
So
from.
right now we have, what, calendar year 21's report? And is it calendar
Yes.
or fiscal?
It's fiscal year. We
Fiscal,
have,
so we don't have 22 yet,
correct.
but, so 21 should be available, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes,
Okay,
yep.
be good to see that sometime.
Absolutely, I can share that.
I might even already have it. I have one of yours, and it's probably when you gave us last spring.
I'll send it
Anyway,
along.
Okay, all right.
So I also, when I went and got myself sworn in, they informed me that that we're supposed to watch an hour-long. It's
Conflict of interest?
That sounds about right.
already did that.
was it a webinar or something
Yeah.
about conflict of interest, and then also read the what's this thing called, the sexual harassment policy, and then you're supposed to sign that you
Yes.
read it. So
okay.
Yeah, make sure you do that.
did you do the most recent one? Because I thought I had done it too, but there's a new one.
I did one for Easthampton.
When?
It's critical that school bus monitors have signed off on conflict of interest training, because I know.
But did you do the
We could be hitting
video?
up the kids for money while we're in there or something.
Did you do the video?
Video?
Because there's something- I thought I had done it.
It was, I don't know, it was a PowerPoint kind of fill in,
Yeah, that's it.
answer the questions
That's
and
it.
move along and
Yeah,
train
that's
them.
it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Hopefully they'll accept my Easthampton test.
Well, they'll tell you if you haven't done it. 'Cause I got an email. I got an email.
Before you close that up, I was just gonna, a couple real quick, because so there's, you have this thing that we're gonna go to, I'm trying to go for a few minutes.
Yes.
So it was brought to me as, thing the city's doing, and there, maybe at some point had been some discussion about whether how our committee might be involved in something that comes out of this, whether like a member of our committee might go sit on another committee that's going to be around this.
Is this regarding the pollinator?
This is regarding the pollinator and the Bee City initiative, or potentially whether, this is not anything that's necessarily going to happen, but like whether like even our committee might morph into something like a little bit larger in terms of like overall sustainability and things like that. That, in my mind, would require it rise to the level like a whole city department and like a paid employee on staff for us to work with or something like that. It was going to be anything larger and more all-encompassing. But just keep that in mind, as you're hearing stuff, because there may be people thinking about how this all fits together and like what this new initiative might mean for the city. The other thing is, there was the school reuse thing, and there were 3 RFPs or 3 responses that came into the RFP. Do you know what the next step, like how the decision-making process is unfolding?
And this, it's not my expertise at all, but my understanding is that they basically created a review committee to look at them, and they will make a recommendation to the city council. And the city council can, accept their recommendation or disregard it or whatever, but the city council makes the final decision on whether or not to accept any of the RFP or proposals.
And once I'd be very interested to know what kind of buildings, what they're planning to do in terms of the retrofitting.
Well, look at each of the
much all housing and low income.
No, I'm talking about having to do with energy.
Oh, the energy.
Yeah.
And I don't,
well, this is what I would like, if we can.
Code.
If everyone can look at the 3 proposals, I've looked at them only briefly. And
I read the article.
Yeah, right. So you can get
started going through the proposal a little bit.
Did you? Okay. So if there's one that stands out to us from an energy standpoint, I thought it might be useful for us to have our piece of input. Like we're not going to be on the decision committee, but from the standpoint of energy, like this looks like the best choice.
I think we should definitely do that. We should all agree that we'll have really looked into it by the next meeting so that we can.
Yeah, so I just don't know the time frame for the other committee.
For that committee that's doing the review, but I would think that if you can give them comments, that would be ideal.
If we have to do it
sooner, we can send it through Jeff or something like that, and Jeff can pass along or something.
Do you think it could be sooner than that?
I couldn't say. I really couldn't
maybe.
say.
I don't know how quickly they're trying to turn it around. So if you see anything about that too, share it.
It should be on
I can imagine they could get a committee together, get them sworn in, have them all read their stuff, and get a decision within 30 days.
I don't know. Oh, this is me. I don't know when they're started, so.
I don't know. They're motivated potentially, and
My disappointment is that one of those buildings isn't available for like a resilience center, and I don't know if this committee or the town
What
has.
do you mean, a resilience? What was that?
It's to shelter people in severe weather, and whether it's hot weather, cold weather, or whatever it is.
That's a good point.
And there are other buildings maybe.
one of the RFPs was only for the Maple School, so if that one was chosen, Senator Pepin would still be available for something.
But they are going to keep the gym.
So if you thought we
One of them I read that they are planning to keep the gym in
one of them has.
maybe that.
Probably to play basketball, not perhaps people swarming in there in severe weather. But, who knows.
There's others that have community space.
They're so centrally located.
They should be available on the planning website, on the city website.
Yes,
They are.
Okay.
Yeah, I've downloaded them.
There must
All
be
right.
already a plan in place for that. You may not be.
No.
There might be some kind of emergency response
Well,
that
they've been
exists. but I
thinking
don't
about
know.
it. They had a process, but do we have a building?
I don't know.
Right.
I don't
I
know.
move that we adjourn.
Oh, yes, I
All right,
do
we've got a
too.
motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.